everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we're doing my April wrap-up. In April, I only really read one book. I DNF'd one book, and I read 2 graphic novels. So I don't have too much to talk about this time. Hopefully we can just make this video short and sweet. I am going to talk about my DNF in this video, which I don't normally do because I don't normally have time without making a video incredibly long to talk about DNFs in a wrap-up. But this time, since I've really only got one book to talk about, we'll talk about the DNF too. I don't have too much to say about my DNF. It was mostly a case of like, not for me, not that I have like strong dislike of the book or any particular problems. So yeah, we'll just dive into it. We'll start with the DNF so that we can end with the books I actually completed. So my one DNF for the month was Matrix by Lauren Groff. This is a historical fiction that is following Marie, who is like a illegitimate child of the king, I believe, and they don't really know what to do with her, and so they decide to send her off to become the prioress at an abbey, which she has never felt called to religion in particular, but she has to go. The way that I first heard this book pitched was that it's about lesbian nuns, which I just thought was a very interesting sounding pitch for a book, and is not inaccurate. I mean, I think that's true about this book, but I ended up just like not getting very invested in this. There wasn't anything that was like wrong with this, and I can definitely understand why people enjoy it, and I think that there's something about the book that I felt fairly removed from the characters. It kind of skips through time pretty quickly and kind of has this form of storytelling that feels very like this happened, then this happened, then this happened, instead of getting to really like live in a character's experience, which is more what I'm looking for out of a book, especially something that is historical fiction. And so I just felt like there was a real distance from the characters, and while I did enjoy Marie as a character, at first I wasn't quite sure how to feel about her, but at a certain point she really decides like, you know what, I'm just going to take control of the situation and get this abbey up and running again, because it's an abbey that has really been struggling for a period of time, and so she really just kind of takes them all in hand and goes like, look, this is what we're doing because we need to make this abbey like work and we all need to live. And I really liked that about her and how strong-minded she was as a character. I just wanted to like feel more involved in her as a character. And also, while the book is, I guess, technically about lesbian nuns, I felt like most of that was, it wasn't really focusing on their relationships that much. It was more like them sleeping together, and then like just about her kind of going around setting up the abbey so that it will be more successful. And I was like, if I'm going to read a book about lesbian nuns, I want it to like be more about their relationships, and I just felt like I wasn't really getting that, and it was much more focused on sort of the events that were happening and less on the character experiences, if that makes sense. So with this, I actually had started reading the physical book a couple of months ago and couldn't really get into it, and so I put it down but decided to come back to it as an audiobook. My audiobook loan came in April, so I started listening to it and I got further into it. When I was about 30% into the book, I kind of realized like this is at best going to be like a 3-star book. And then when I got to about 40%, I realized that I was really just zoning out during the audiobook and wasn't really listening anymore. So I decided to DNF it, not because it's terrible, but just because I was like, you know, at best it would be 3 stars and just something that is very forgettable to me that really doesn't leave an impression, so I don't really want to spend my time listening to it. Anyway, so that was my one DNF for the month. The one like full book that I read was The Hidden City by Michelle West. So this is part of a larger series that, so Michelle West has this world that like I don't know how to pronounce, but she has multiple series that are set within this world. This is one of the places that you can start. So I decided to, I had started somewhere else, but decided to actually start the series, start here now. And in this, we start out following this man named Wrath, who is, he has some kind of mysterious background that's linked to nobility, but now he lives a very simple, reclusive life in the city, where he has found this underground, he's found this kind of lost underground city where he steals artifacts from it and then like resells them to other people, to collectors. And that is essentially how he makes his living. But he is very reclusive, very secretive, because he's the only one, as far as we know, he's the only one who knows about this like lost underground city, and that is his main source of income, so he doesn't want anyone else to find out about it. So he's very like, you know, I have no close relationships, I work alone, I never, you know, get to know anybody, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. One day, a young girl tries to steal money from him. He ends up tracking her down and finds her by the river and finds out that she is sick, and he ends up kind of taking her home with him and taking care of her. She's like 10, and for some reason he feels like a connection to her and feels like I need to take care of her for whatever reason. And so the two of them kind of develop this bond, and her name is Jewel, or she goes by Jay. And he ends up taking care of her, and they have this bond, and then Jay kind of decides that she needs to take care of like all of the other children who don't have homes in the city. She keeps like finding these other kids that she wants to take in. Wrath is very upset about this because he has been so, you know, reclusive and alone for so long, and he is like, every time she brings someone home he's mad, but he also lets her do it. So he plays this very like grumpy mentor kind of role. And Jay has some kind of power that makes her be able to tell like, this is a person that I am meant to know or meant to have in my life. So it's not just every child in the city, it's specific people that she feels that there is some like predestined reason that she is meant to know this person. So she's kind of collecting all of these other children and creating her own den, and Wrath starts to teach them different skills, essentially how to be like thieves and how to defend themselves and things like that. And so this book, like, it's very slow. There's not like a ton of plot to it, which I really enjoyed. It's very much focused on the characters. Most of the story is really just about Jay finding these kids and taking them in. It's very much like the origin story of this like band of kids, and how is she finding them and why she feels a connection to them, and then the various ways that they're like kind of taking care of them and stuff. And like one of them needs to get revenge on somebody, and so how do they go about doing that? I do think I really enjoyed the first half of the book more than the second half of the book, for a couple of reasons. In the second half, we do get to a point where Wrath ends up meeting with some other characters who essentially do world building, but it's in this way that feels very clunky, where they're kind of just, it's a moment of exposition, you know, they're just like having a conversation, and they're like, here's a full chapter of me just explaining to you who all of these different characters are and the history of this place and like that kind of thing. So that, I just didn't really like that form of delivery for the for the world building, and that really slowed down my reading because I would just kind of get bogged down and get a little bit bored during those chapters. The second half also, they introduce a character who I just like didn't like as much as some of the other characters, and that character kind of becomes more central to things, and the second half is more focused on like kind of a revenge plot for that character. So I just like wasn't as into the second half, which, I mean, the second half is the half that had like 1, more world building, and 2, more of an actual plot because there was kind of a revenge plot. The first half was much more just like people running around, running into kids and being like, oh, you're gonna be part of our den now. And I was like much more into this like plotless version of the book. I did really enjoy the characters in this. I liked Wrath as this sort of like grumpy mentor who's been so reclusive before but now has this like den of children who all live with him. And he like hates it but also takes care of them. And I liked Jay a lot as a character. She is a type of character that I have definitely seen other authors attempt to write and are not always successful. There is something about her that she has this real like stubborn kindness that I have seen many other characters written that way, and for whatever reason it can often ring hollow, and it feels like this kind of like, you know, hollow default setting for characters of like, oh, but you know, they're a main character so we want them to be a nice person. For whatever reason in this, that kind of stubborn kindness where she feels this real compulsion to take care of people felt much more genuine and organic to her character. I don't know why it worked for me, but it did, and I really liked her. I liked a lot of the other characters that she was collecting around her. Sometimes, like, there are definitely things that I can critique about this book, like the fact that it doesn't always make sense why these other characters are so intensely loyal to her. Like, there's a degree of explanation that you could make in that they're characters, like they're kids who really have nowhere else to go and are often, you know, starving or abused in some way, and she takes them in and gives them a home and all of this and like a sense of belonging, and so they feel this loyalty to her. But there's a certain degree of like the intensity of loyalty and like how quickly it develops that I was like, I'm not sure if this like really makes sense, but also I don't care because I just like enjoy their little found family vibes. Also just the fact that all of these kids, like Jay, I'm pretty sure is like 10. The oldest kid is maybe 13, and like some of the younger ones are like 6, right? So they're pretty young. They definitely do not read like children. Like some of the stuff like some of the things that they say, but especially the way that Jay thinks and the way that she like, I don't know, thinks about other characters and their relationships and the degree of insight and like, not that kids can't be insightful, but just like the way in which she thinks, I'm like, this is definitely an adult. Like these kids do not read as children. Like they're very much like not even teenagers. So if that's something that bothers you, you'll probably be frustrated with this. It's something that I was like, not my favorite, but also again, I just enjoyed the characters a lot. So I kind of just went with it. There's a certain amount that like, if I'm enjoying things enough in a book, I can just sort of roll with a lot of things that I might be more nitpicky about in another book that I was not enjoying so much. Another thing that I enjoyed about this, but also was kind of like, I'm not sure. I was like, I enjoy this, but also not sure how I feel about it, is Michelle West's writing. Because her writing has some definite like eccentricities to it. Like I enjoyed her writing. I found it really easy to read and fly through. I liked the way that she wrote her characters and set the world and like all of this stuff. But there were definitely like certain times where the way in which she phrased things it was not like grammatically incorrect, but there were times where I had to like reread a sentence a few times that I was like, I'm not sure why you said these things in this order. It would have made more sense to like, it would have been more straightforward to just like say things in this order. I'm not sure how to explain exactly what it is, but it took me a minute to get used to her writing because it just definitely has some eccentricities to the way in which she phrases things, I guess, or constructs her sentences. But once I got used to it, I found the book very easy to read and really enjoyed it. One of the things though that I didn't like at the end of the book was the way in which sexual assault was kind of used and talked about, and I was kind of like, I'm not quite sure how to feel about this. Some of the characters who are kids in this have experienced sexual abuse. I'll put like other content warnings in the description for this, but there is a point where they have a plan that involves essentially using one of the kids as bait to like catch a predator kind of thing. And there is a point when, I'm trying to explain this in a like vague way, but there is a different character, one of the other kids, who is essentially thinking like, oh, like she should have to go through this because I went through it, and that will somehow like she needs to understand this, and kind of framing sexual assault in this way of that some books do, of like it's something that characters need to go through in order to like grow as a character, which I always really hate when books do that. I do think though that the way in which that attitude is framed in the book, it's very much coming from this one character's perspective. And I don't think that it is framed as like she is right for thinking or feeling in this way so much as this is kind of a result of her own experience with sexual abuse and sort of the way that she is coping with it. So I just kind of didn't know how to feel about it, because I was like, I really don't like it when books frame sexual assault in that way. However, I don't think that the author was framing it as like, this is true or the correct way to feel about this, so much as this is this individual character's experience or thought process because of her past experiences. So yeah, that was a point like right at the end that I was kind of like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. But overall, with this book, I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I was thinking for the first half of the book that it would be more in the like 4.5 range. But then with how it kind of dragged for me in the second half and some of those things that happened at the end, I just ended up going with 3.5. I still want to continue on with the series at this point because I did enjoy so much of this book, but it wasn't as consistently great for me as I was hoping it would be at the beginning. But yeah, so 3.5 stars for this one. And this was the one book that I finished in April. Then at the end of April, I reread the first two Heartstopper graphic novels, because like a lot of people, I watched Heartstopper, the Netflix adaptation, and really enjoyed it. It was a great adaptation, and from that decided that I wanted to reread at least the first two, because the first season of the show covers the first two graphic novels, so I decided to reread these. I don't have too much to say about these. You know, they are contemporary YA high school romance between these two boys. One of them is kind of artsy, the other is like a rugby player, so it seems a little bit like opposites attract, but they end up being so sweet and wholesome together. The one who, like, they're both just such cinnamon rolls, and the one who is a rugby player is just like a golden retriever in human form, and they are so sweet together, and it's just such a cute story, and I love them. I loved it the first time, I loved it this time reading it again. So it was very fun to reread these. So those are all the things that I read or DNF'd in April. This mostly turned into just a review of The Hidden City, but I'd love to know, how is your April reading? I hope you all are doing wonderfully, but thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!